Good morning on this Sunday, October 29th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. A federal judge throws out Georgia's political maps, a ruling that could help Democrats. Georgia's lieutenant governor proposes paying teachers to carry guns in schools, and the state Supreme Court allows Georgia's abortion law to stand. Kathy, Phil, Farron, and Martha are all here. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Governor Brian Kemp orders a special session of the legislature on November 29th to redraw Georgia's district lines. A federal judge ruled this week that some of Georgia's congressional, state Senate, and state House districts were drawn in a racially discriminatory manner. In a more than 500-page order, federal Judge Steve Jones ordered the state to draw an additional black majority congressional district. Farron, not many of us are surprised by this ruling, but it could have some major ramifications.
It sure will. And, and to even go further, Lori, I mean, what Judge Jones said was that this ruling that he made was because it legally diluted black voting power in the state of Georgia. So I want to call it what it is. And so while Republicans knew that this was going to come back, the fact still remains that you had a Republican-controlled legislature that intentionally and unintentionally drew a map that wasn't, like it didn't agree with the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And so now what's happening is that November 29th, you're going to have all these legislators that are going to go back down between the Gold Dome, and this issue is going to be on the ballot. So what's at stake is that the judge said we got to have 2 new Senate seats that are majority black districts and also 3 House seats. Now, the House Democrats need about roughly 12 seats to try to get control.
You're talking about State House, right?
State House, yeah.
Okay,
we were going to get to that. I want to talk about the congressional the congressional seats first, because we'll get to the state house.
Yeah, well, okay, so I went in reverse order, but I can talk about congressional too. So where the growth has occurred in this state is probably West Atlanta. So there are a lot of people wanting to see, okay, will there be a new district possibly drawn? And also a lot of people are talking about Congressional District 6, which right now Congressman McCormick sort of occupies. And so what happens is if you redraw that district, then there's a lot of talk, what would Congresswoman Lucy McBath do? Because will her district change and where she is now? So there's a lot of maneuvering on the federal level, but I think that Steve Jones, a good Athenian, did the right thing, and he made the right call by basically sending this back to the legislature for them to get it right.
Let's talk about the congressional ramifications, Phil. He mentioned McCormick's district, but anybody else on that west side that could be impacted?
Well, yes, and just kind of for the viewers, we've got 14 members of Congress, and 9 of them are Republican and 5 are Democrat. I think one thing the Republicans will be figuring out is that can we still keep that 9-5 majority even if we have to create a majority black district? And that'll be very interesting as we start running the numbers here. Secondly, I think it ought to be clear that the Republicans argue that we were just going with legal mechanisms that have already been recognized. The U.S. Supreme Court years ago said you can redistrict for partisan purposes. Well, okay, a lot of Democrats are black. Let's just face the facts. And so we saw this coming because of Alabama. This is how it started. And so it's not a surprise that this happened here. The federal judge did this. It will be appealed, from what I'm told. But I think that, just to Theron's point, we're going to have to look very carefully because the Supreme Court has also said you cannot tear up neighborhoods. You have to keep communities intact. And just looking at the maps, it's going to be very difficult. Alabama had to struggle to create a black district, and it's even competitive. So this may happen here.
Kathy, as Theron had mentioned, the judge also ordered the state to draw 2 new black majority districts in Georgia's state Senate and 5 new black majority districts in the state House.
Well, I say let the games begin. I think when we'll have the special session, we'll see how this all turns out. Obviously, people are drawing maps as we speak and getting ready to go. But I do think that it bodes well for Democrats perhaps taking control of the House in Washington and beginning to tick away at the majority that Republicans have in this state. I think we're still a long way off from a Democratic majority, but it'll be good to see some reckoning on these districts and sort of evening it up a little bit.
Martha.
So going back to the congressional seats for just a moment, I think what's really interesting and people forget is that Lucy McBath wouldn't have necessarily lost that seat based on how it was drawn. But she decided to go over into the 7th, where she displaced a white female Democrat in order for a black female Democrat, which is fine that they ran a primary, that was it. But the thing people forget is the kind of a little bit of gamesmanship that Republicans did with themselves, which was the way they redrew the 9th congressional district. They took 40% of Gwinnett County, put it in with the 9th, pushed out Jackson County and Barrow County out of the 9th district, and that was done mainly because Congressman Andrew Clyde didn't play ball the way the Republican majority wanted them to. So we've got a lot of work to be done on these maps. There may be an appeal, as Phil said, and I think that's important to note, but I don't think this was unexpected. And as to Theron's point, Steve Jones, he rules very conservatively sometimes. He rules, this was a little more literal translation. He's been on our side on many decisions. I think he's a good judge, and I'm willing to read all of the decision and see where it goes.
500 pages.
Yes, it's a long one. I haven't finished it, Phil.
I'm kind of hoping we can all agree that redistricting really is sort of the key to the failure we're having in our democracy right now, right? And it's a Democrat problem, it's a Republican problem. Let's not point fingers at who started it. It's been going on forever. But whenever you have these districts that are packed with any one kind of anybody, legislators lose the motivation to have to listen to everybody. And that's what's going on in this country. And it's getting, more refined and more refined and more refined, where these districts are such that, if you're in the minority of whatever it is in your area, you don't have a voice. And we've got to get back to a place where people have to listen to both sides.
In 2001, I was called into an office to look at the original maps of the congressional districts. And they were drawn up by the University of Georgia, and they took into consideration communities, didn't take into consideration issues related to who was representing it at that point. And the maps did make a lot of sense. I will give you that point. But they would have all been competitive districts. I don't have a problem with that. But would Democrats who like having certain packed districts have a problem with it? Would Republicans have a problem with it? So it'll be interesting to see. I liked the maps when they were competitive, but again, we'll see how it goes. But the Constitution's clear that this is a political process, and I think that that's what happens.
Well, the maps are already being drawn.
Yes,
right,
they are.
There's
probably already been drawn.
Yeah. They knew this was coming.
Yeah, but I also don't want to dilute. We knew it was coming, because this is what Republicans have done well. Oh, we knew this was coming. Oh, we knew we were going to come back. No, this is the fact. They drew maps that clearly violated the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It illegally diluted black voting power in the state, period. So when they were in there sort of moving around the 9th and moving around the 6th and the 7th, I don't want to think that they did it with evil intentions.
They did it for partisan purposes.
But they did it for partisan purposes. And but you did it and you broke the law. All right, if I just can make it plain. You did it for partisan purpose.
We don't know that
yet.
And then
the judge said illegally you drew maps that diluted black voting power. So now the Republicans have opportunity. They want to embrace diversity. They talk a good game about bringing more people of color into their party. Will draw maps that are fair, that can legally pass the smell test, and it reflects the growth of the state. I'm saying the Republicans have an opportunity, and Democrats got to also make sure that they hold them accountable and make sure that they produce maps that actually reflect what Judge Jones said he wants to see by, I think it's December 8th of this year.
But just to be fair, and I love the data, there was not a reduction in black represented seats. Okay, so there was not fewer black representatives. So that's why Republicans thought that maybe it wouldn't go this way. Do you know what I'm saying? Because there wasn't actually a reduction in the number of black representatives.
The judge said it illegally diluted black voting power. I'm only going by what the judge said.
But here's the flip side of the coin, though, Theron. If you're packing blacks into one congressional district, you're whitening the areas around them. And kind of to your point, it's dividing people.
No, I think what Kathy is saying is that make sure we draw maps that are reflective of the diversity of the state, and also not allow legislators to cherry pick what areas they want to represent because of political purposes. That's what I'm saying.
But one all-black district isn't reflective.
Listen, this is a great time for artificial intelligence to jump in and solve our problem, right? No, listen to me now. If we could come to some agreement on what percentage is a competitive district, then you could start running, algorithms to pull up maps, and we could start talking about it, because I've done that. And what it shows is you get a whole lot more than 5 new House seats and 2 new Senate seats on the Democratic side. You get more like 10 to 15 just by running an objective map and tinkering with what you think is a competitive district. And that's where I think we need to go. And frankly, I think citizens need to be in charge of it and not let legislators pick their own voters.
That's the age-old argument. All right,
Yep.
we'll leave it there. Thanks, everybody. Up next, Georgia's lieutenant governor says he wants to pay teachers $10,000 if they'll come to school armed. We'll discuss next.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Georgia's lieutenant governor said this week he wants to pay teachers $10,000 a year to encourage them to carry guns in schools. Republican Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones added he wants the state to spend more money on school safety, including paying for teachers and other non-officers to take firearms training and paying teachers who hold a firearms training certificate an annual bonus. Phil, to you first on this. I really want to hit both sides here, because to the critics of this who say, you know, these guns could fall into the wrong hands. High schoolers, middle schoolers can get their hands on these guns, and I know that teachers would have to go through training, but this is dicey.
Well, I think it's basically a good idea, and it would be a grant that you could either, if we're on the school board of a county or whatever system, you can either accept it or not accept it. So it's not mandatory. Let's get that out of the way. But secondly, I hope they do have a trained person. I mean, we're looking at what happened in Maine this week, and you know, I've got grandkids in a public schools. I want somebody in that school right there if some crazy comes in there and starts firing. You don't have to wait 5 or 10 minutes like we've seen in some of these other school shootings. So you could have off-duty policemen, you could have former military. I know teachers who are former military that can be trained. And nothing's perfect, but I think this is better than having no one in a school.
Kathy, what about that argument? Because God forbid you have an armed intruder come into one of our schools and you have unarmed teachers. You know, what's the balance?
Well, I think
here?
asking teachers to engage in a shootout while they're trying to protect the kids that they're supervising at the moment is not the right way to go. And you know, to that point, to offer people $10,000 to take gun training and hold a gun, where you've got school resource officers making $80,000 a year or more, why don't we just give that $10,000 to teachers so that they'll show up and take the additional training they need to educate our kids? But arming schools is not the way to go. I think there's other solutions, not the least of which is banning assault weapons so that people don't have access to them. But you know, asking teachers to carry guns, and you know, teachers have mental health problems too. You know, what's to say that they're not going to take their gun and use it in the
So you'd
the
leave some
classroom on
schools
their-
unprotected. You don't care about
They have
that.
school resource officers now. There's other plans that you
Not
can have to
armed.
lock down a school.
You don't want them armed, I guess.
Well, we have $11 billion budget surplus,
Yeah.
right? And the issue is like the money and school resource officers. 'Cause $80,000 in some districts maybe can't afford that in every school. So Martha, what's...
Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is we've had some ability to do this since 2014, and not a lot of school systems have picked up on using it, okay? So here's the thing. Most of this idea of an armed intruder coming in is really not what really happens in school shootings. What happens in school shootings is usually someone that had some affiliation with the school, either a former student, something like that. You look at Columbine, you look at Newtown, you look at Parkland. It's generally somebody you know. And in Hall County, what Will Schofield, who is the longest serving superintendent in the state, is doing is he is teaching kids conflict resolution. He is teaching, and he's reduced the amount of fights, the amount of violence going on in the schools. And this program, we had a presentation about it recently. He doesn't believe hardening schools is the way to solve this problem. And he's the most conservative guy you're ever going to meet. He is a very strong guy and he's doing something that's working in Hall County, and it is teaching kids conflict management as opposed to just dealing with the hardening. It's got to be a two-pronged process, but this could work.
Theron, the Georgia Association of Educators came out really strong against this idea of arming teachers.
And I commend them for that. Look, besides my mother, I can think of all the people who have an impact in my life are all teachers. You know, my mentor, Dr. Russell Studevant, is a former principal at Clark Central High School where I still talk to him this day. So I called literally 8 teachers and I asked them one simple question: what do you think about this proposal? And 2 of them were principals. All 8 of them said this is a crazy idea. And this is what they said, to Martha's point. Yeah, there are intruders, whether they had a prior existing relationship with that school or not. They said, why don't we use this money to make sure that it's tougher for you to enter a school without being checked properly. More metal detectors, more sort of procedures in place to make sure that the school is safe. Secondly, they said exactly what Kathy said. a lot of these principals, they de-escalate disputes between teachers themselves. And being a teacher is the most noble job that one can have, but they're human. And then lastly, what they said is that the resource officers, to Phil's point, we need to make sure we have not one, but maybe two of them across the state. And that way you have one at the entrance, you have one in the classroom.
Would they be armed?
And I think most of them, when I asked them that question, are you okay with them being armed? They said yes. And so I think that this idea is going to get a tremendous amount of pushback, not only from teachers, and I think that the public needs to pay very close attention about this. And the last thing, Lori, as Phil said, we just saw a person in Maine go kill almost 20 people. I think the number is 18 people, right? Why would we surrender to evil by basically giving people more guns to try to protect ourselves? I think you got to give the training to the resource officers and make sure that we use this $11 billion surplus to get more trained people who are armed resource officers in these schools all across the state of Georgia.
I got to move on, but we will revisit this topic because I'm sure it's bound to come up over and over again. Moving on, Jenna Ellis, an attorney and prominent conservative media figure, reached a deal with prosecutors this week and pleaded guilty to reduced charges over efforts to overturn Donald Trump's 2020 election loss in Georgia. Ellis is the fourth defendant in the case to enter into a plea deal and was charged alongside the Republican former president and 17 others with violating the state's anti-racketeering law. Phil, Insider Advantage had an interesting take on all these plea deals.
That's right. It's supposed to be all done by Fani Willis, the district attorney in Fulton County, under an anti-racketeering law. All of them got probation, these four people. What? It had nothing to do with the RICO anti-racketeering law. It's a joke. Kenneth Cheesebro, who supposedly, according to Willis, is this so-called architect of some sort of overthrowing the election, he gets probation and a $5,000 fine. It's a joke. The prominent attorneys, again, that I talked to, you've heard me say this before, all say this is a very faulty case. Steve Sadow, who is Trump's attorney, says it's a bargaining chip, and I think it's prosecutorial abuse. I think you've hauled in 18 people aside from the former president. You're forcing them to spend at least $500,000, and you're trying to get them to say whatever they're going to say because they don't want to pay it. They're going to be bankrupted. And so this is not the RICO case that supposedly is done with mafia chieftains or gang leaders. It's I think, a weak case.
Kathy?
Well, we could have a whole show on just the RICO statute and how it gets abused in this state, so we'll just leave that on the table. But I think what's important is that we'll see at the end of this. I think Fani Willis is doing a great job of keeping her strategy off the table in the early stages and saving it to the end. These folks, what gets me is that you've got folks that are pleading guilty to lies that they told, to legislators, to the public, and now they're saying, oh, I didn't really mean to do it, I did it. And we see this time and time again with folks who support Trump and this posturing. And again, I think it's not doing our country well. We just saw a speaker elected that's done exactly the same thing, we're just not done with this mess.
All right, we'll leave it there, folks. Coming up, Atlanta city leaders say the state of emergency services in Atlanta hits crisis mode.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
Georgia's Supreme Court ruled the state's restrictive abortion law can stand, but also sent the issue back to Fulton County Superior Court, so we have not heard the last of all of the court challenges. Isn't that right, Martha?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good day for life in Georgia, and I think that it's important that this law is going to stand, but we'll see what happens with Fulton County. I was happy about the decision. I thought it made sense, and, it shows that the law stands. So I'm in good shape with that.
Darren, it's not over.
Yeah, to quote Andrea Young, who's the daughter of Ambassador Andrew Young, who runs the ACLU, she said, look, the fight for women's reproductive rights, a right for a woman to choose in this state is not over. She also said that she believes that the abortion issue in Georgia is not only going to be a topic in this upcoming legislative session, but it's going to be on the ballot in 2024. And so while it wasn't sort of, again, not a surprise, I mean, the Supreme Court, I think 6-1 decided that this was not right. They rejected Judge McBurney's decision to declare that the abortion ban definitely was illegal, and it didn't go through. And so now I think you'll see legislators talk about this again, and then you'll see a lot of different groups on the pro-choice side continue to talk about how we need to to fully invest in a woman's right to choose and really give more resources towards reproductive rights in the state for women.
All right. Atlanta city leaders say the state of emergency services in Atlanta is in crisis as fire officials battle ongoing issues with its vehicle fleet and new data showing a 50% increase in calls for service. Kathy, you know I'm coming to you for this one. The Atlanta fire chief sounding the alarm on this one. 17 trucks fully out of service, most of them on the south side of the city. Former Atlanta City Council president.
Where's the leadership? What I don't get is, you know when this rolling stock is going to, go out of commission, and where were the investments? I mean, the money's there, they've got to do it. Now, of course, when you let all of them crash and burn, not to use a pun, you're just going to have to spend more money to sort of bring them all on at the same time, and that's not the way to do it. I just don't know what the mayor and the city council are doing when, this comes up like it's a surprise to people,
Phil, did they kick the can down the road on this one?
Well, they did, and I agree with you, Kathy. There should be maintenance going on, and the inspectors should be giving reports to city council and the mayor. It's a disgrace.
All right, moving on. Attorneys representing Georgia's 3 public HBCUs, Albany State, Fort Valley State, and Savannah State universities, filed a federal lawsuit Tuesday alleging that the schools have been woefully underfunded in recent decades. The suit mainly revolves around Fort Valley State. The U.S. Secretary of Education stating in a letter, Fort Valley would have received more than $600 million over the past 30 years if its per-student funding had been equal to UGA's. Many supporters of the lawsuit are eyeing again that $11 billion budget surplus. Theron, you are the graduate of an HBCU. Your take on this?
Yeah, I think that, Carlos made a good point. I mean, not only were the attorneys there, they were joined by several state legislators that was sort of a mixture of people who represent these areas. And as a person who not only went to HBCU and also a proud trustee member of Clark Atlanta University, this was very, very disappointing to me. I mean, the fact that they could have actually over the last 30 years got $600 million plus funding, it to me shows that the Board of Regents need to really look into this. And if at a time where we celebrate the University of Georgia and Kennesaw State and Georgia State and other universities, they have raised a very legitimate question. And not only Fort Valley State, we got to look at Albany State, we got to look at Savannah State. And if this is a case that this school could have actually received upwards of $600 million, then I want to know how much did Albany State miss out on and how much did Savannah State miss out on as well. And so at a time where Republicans and Democrats have all talked about HBCUs and we need to strengthen them, one way to do it is to make sure that the funding is adequately and in a very comprehensive way is shared equally across the state.
Martha?
Well, the attorney in this case is going to get kudos from me just because he's making this, I'm assuming it's a he, is making this connection, okay? Because it's great that this is for HCBUs, but
HBCUs.
I'm sorry, HBCUs. The problem is when you compare to UGA, Tech, and Georgia State, every single other university underneath there is not getting the same amount that they get. Okay, so is this an ongoing Board of Regents issue? Is it a problem for the entire university system? Is this something that, or have we accepted that the research universities get more than the other universities do? I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's opened a door to the entire university system, not just the HBCUs.
Phil, I got about 30 seconds.
Well, you're making a good point. I mean, there's only 4 research universities in the system in this state, and they are getting more money, and they should get more money. Sadly, the Board of Regents has to be wrestling with the fact that these colleges are losing student population, and that is a huge problem. That's why we had to merge about 10 years or so, and so it's tough to have equal funding.
Kathy, you want to?
Well, it's a pattern of discrimination, though. I mean, it's not just like last year the funding wasn't up to snuff. It was for 30 years that the funding wasn't up to snuff, and it's investment in South Georgia, quite frankly, and the education of young people in South Georgia who would then go on to start businesses and do other things as a result of that.
I got to leave it there.
Okay.
All right. Well, coming up, winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Phil, we'll start with you.
Okay, I've got losers. Cobb County Democrats. What in the world is the matter with them? The Democrat-controlled county commission refuses to condemn Hamas in a resolution and says, oh, maybe we better rethink this. Wait, and then the Cobb County Board of Elections, as I mentioned, the Democrat-controlled, refused to do the the Pledge of Allegiance. I don't get it. However, on a happy note, I do have a winner, sadly, though. It's a person, well-respected lobbyist who passed at age 76, Dolores Gallego, and she was a longtime Delta lobbyist. She worked for the last 10 years with Harold Beavis. She was a great lady and a winner.
All right, Kathy.
Hey, I want to give a shout out to my friend Christy Jackson, who is the head of the Washington Park Conservancy here in Atlanta. She's been working for years to get Miss Eugenia Hope recognized as one of the women who was a suffragette and tried to help women get the vote, black women in particular. And she got a plaque put up at the Washington Park Natatorium on Saturday, and then a couple hours later she went over to Ebenezer and got a National Service Award from President Biden, and it was a great day for her, and congratulations, Christy.
Nice. Martha.
So I'm going to be all winners this week. Amber Bishop Bentley has been named the chair of the Jekyll Island Foundation Board, and so all of us know her, and she's doing great. And the memer of Congress, Congressman Mike Collins, he is in the news everywhere this week, and he's my winner.
Darren.
All right, Atlanta Habitat for Humanity celebrating 40 years with their Thrive Awards for honoring homeowners. Also want to make Judge Steve Jones a winner. And Mo Diggs, who is retiring from Fox 5, 41 years. There's a picture circulating around social media. He still looks the same after all this time. And also want to recognize Anna Roach and the Atlanta Regional Commission. They held their annual breakfast this week. And Mitch Landrieu, the former mayor of New Orleans, gave a really good speech about why President Biden has delivered on all his promises in Georgia. So good job.
Leave it there, everyone. See you next week.